Hey everyone, this is Wynne, and this facilitation is on rating scales and program action research. And the content comes from Chapter 3, pages 47 and 48, although I do pull a little more information from the other Sager textbook. But most of the information comes from the Action Research Guidebook. The rubric that you see on this screen is pretty typical of what we're used to seeing as teachers. It's a blank form where you have your criteria listed down the side and your rating scale across the top. We're going to go into a little more detail about what these rating scales are and how we can use them in action research. So for my second slide, we're going to answer the question of what are rating scales. And we've seen these our whole lives. We're just digging a little bit deeper into this topic. These are ways to assess quality of a targeted performance. Teachers, we use these mostly for student work. And most of the time we call these rubrics. I don't think I've ever referred to these as rating scales until reading this section from Sager's textbooks. Like I said, we see these a lot of the time in our lives. So much of the time it's because you have businesses that are looking to kind of gather information for their own personal use, for their businesses, for self-improvement. We use them for student work so that we can show kids before they do their work what their expectation is of their targeted performance. But we shouldn't assume that it's always used for student work in schools. We can actually use them in other ways. So let's talk about that a little bit deeper. So over here, we're going to answer the question now, when can reading skills or rubrics be used? Of course, we just talked about assessing student performance, and I'm sure a lot of us have had experience in writing our own rubrics. In fact, Rubistar, when that came out several years ago, that was a way that we created rubrics on our own with a lot more ease than just drawing them out on a piece of paper. But you can also use rating scales to monitor school improvement programs. In my first facilitation, I talked about schools that adopted school-wide behavior management plans. So if you have something like PBIS that's coming into your school, your administration might send out some sort of rating scale to ask the teachers or even the students, if they're old enough, to put in their 2 cents using a rating scale about these improvement plans for their schools. You can also survey your participants in research, basically gauging how they feel before and after participating, maybe use for debriefing after you've had them participate in your research. And then, of course, there's the topic of data triangulation. If you're trying to strengthen your data collection that you have in your research, this could be something that either you create yourself, a rating scale to use in your work, or you might actually pull scores that come from rating scales that have already been used. On the right side of your screen, you see a rating scale that we would be familiar with in the real world outside of education, where maybe a business owner wanted to know how to improve upon his restaurant. And I actually pulled this from, if you see the website below, it's actually a site that talks about how to create a rating scale for your business from SNAP surveys. And this might be a way for them to very informally and very unofficially get data for their own business to see what they need to improve upon. You know, if they find out that they have really great service but their quality of food is low, they could work with that score and try to improve upon that particular area. We might see this in schools for, school climate. Maybe a school is suffering in its school climate and they need to find ways to improve upon that, either by surveying the teachers or even the parents in their particular community. Well, how do we create performance rating scales? I know sometimes we turn to the internet or we turn to our peers to try to find ones that already exist, but sometimes you just can't find them, and so you have to come up with a way to create them. And you can't just throw some words onto a graph and call it done. You have to follow steps, and they're actually not very difficult. The first thing that you want to do is to visualize excellent achievement. So define what it is that your on-target performance is going to be. So for example, I taught fifth grade for many years, and we were responsible for helping our students come up with science fair projects and present them. So think about what your on-target performance would be for something like a science fair project. And then the second step would be to identify what your component traits are. So I have over here, this is a self-created blank template that I've made over here, where you have your traits listed down the side. You know, what is it in a science fair project that you want them to be working on? Like, it might be the steps of the scientific method. You know, the first criteria might be how they identified the topic or the question. The second one might be how they showed their research. Of course, if you're making this a set of traits for something else, it could be staff morale, reading fluency, inferential comprehension skills. It could be, I mean, you can use these for just about anything. And then, of course, the last step, you have creating performance continua for each trait. You have to define what your minimum and what your outstanding performances are going to look like. I think it's important, though, to mention that when you're rating these, we should not define the highest level as being perfectly on target. This should be the above and beyond, or that outstanding performance. Usually we think of proficiency as being that on-target performance, and everything beyond that is what's extra. I mean, we've talked as teachers, we talk to our students about extra credit or going above and beyond, what that would actually look like. And then being able to work backward from there. And you should also know that when you're defining your continua, to make sure that you're using language that's very clear, very concise, and basically you want a layman to be able to look at your performance rating scale and be able to follow it. I always try to have parents in mind when I'm creating a rubric like this, so that if they were to sit down with their child and say, like, here's what you did and how you performed, they would be able to understand it with their child. It's also a good idea that if you are going to develop something like this for your students, to actually share with them ahead of time what their target performances are, so they're not completely caught off guard when they get their grades back. A couple of discussion questions I'd like to ask you guys for this facilitation. First, how can you use rating scales to strengthen your own research data? And there are, I'm sure, a number of things that you can come up with for here, but I'd like to know your personal opinions. And then finally, is there a way that you can use a rating scale in your own research? You may not, but if you can, how would you do it? Would you pull a rating scale that already exists and implement it? Would you pull scores from a rating scale that's already been used? Or would you come up with your own? And then, of course, our references. Like I said, I use both the Sager texts for this particular slideshow. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, just give me a shout. Thanks, guys.